Your idea wasn't worse, your delivery was. Here's the psychology behind who actually gets heard in a meeting. And once you understand the mechanics of how people actually process information in a meeting, you stop being at the mercy of the room and you'll start influencing it. My name is Diondra Filicetti and I'm a professional speaker and trainer, and I help leaders, speakers, and professionals with communication and team engagement. I'm gonna share psychology-backed strategies and examples for greater influence in meetings. Let's get right into it. Let's imagine you're in a meeting and you've made a great point, but it gets rejected before anyone's actually thought about it. Before you even finish your sentence, the room's already decided how to judge it. Strategy number 1 is pre-suasion, a concept from persuasion researcher Robert Cialdini. And it's different from persuasion itself. Persuasion is the argument you make. Pre-suasion is what you do right before it. And it actually decides which mental framework the room uses to judge what comes next. Same fact, 2 frames, 2 different verdicts. You're not changing the information, you're just changing the lens. So here's an example of a statement with no frame. I think we should delay the launch by 2 weeks. Instant pushback. The word delay triggers a missed deadline frame, and people start defending the timeline before they've even heard your reasoning. Instead, set the frame first. Before I say this, I want us thinking about the risk to the brand, not just these timelines. And so with that lens on, I think we should delay the launch by 2 weeks. Identical request, but you've told the room what to measure before they've even measured it. Delay no longer sounds like failure, it sounds reasonable. The next one is almost entirely about managing your own anxiety, not the room's. It's called strategic silence. Silence after you speak sometimes feels unbearable, and most people rush to fill it, hedging, qualifying, or walking back what they just said. And the room reads that rushed in noise as uncertainty, even when the point itself was strong. So you actually end up undermining yourself before anyone even has the chance to. Here's what this sounds like. I think we should just cut the feature, but I mean, I don't know, what do you guys think? Is that crazy? You had a clear point, but then spent the next 5 seconds taking it back. Nobody even had a chance to disagree with you. You kind of did it for them. Here's the alternative. I think we should cut the feature. Nothing. 2 full seconds of silence. That pause does 2 things. It signals that you're not anxious about the statement, which actually reads as conviction. And it forces the room to actually sit with what you said instead of reacting on instinct. 9 times out of 10, someone else breaks the silence first. And now they're responding to your frame, not you scrambling to defend it. The next strategy is borrowed credibility. This one's rooted in social proof, one of the most well-documented influence principles that there is. When people are unsure how much to trust new information, they look for cues about what other credible people think. It's faster than verifying everything themselves, and so the brain will often default to this, especially in a fast-moving meeting. Without that credibility signal, even a good idea sounds like a guess. For example, I think we should move budget from paid ads to referrals. Could be right. Sounds unverified though. The room has no fast way to evaluate. But one sentence of borrowed credibility can change that. I ran this by Priya in finance and she pulled the numbers. Referrals are outperforming paid ads by 3 to 1. I think we should move budget to referrals. Same recommendation, but now the room has a credible second source that lets them skip deciding whether to believe you from scratch. Everything so far has been about how you deliver a point, but meetings are also group dynamics. And the next problem isn't about your delivery at all. It's about the person who tends to talk over others. This strategy is called the labeling technique, and it comes from hostage and business negotiation research used specifically for de-escalation. Labeling means naming the dynamic in the room out loud in neutral language, instead of naming the person or reacting to what they're doing. People don't feel attacked by a label the way that they feel attacked by a direct correction. So they don't get as defensive. For example, after being interrupted for the 3rd time, you might instinctively say, "Can you let me finish?" Reasonable, but it's a direct correction aimed at a person, and it often triggers a small power struggle that neither of you actually wanted. Here's the labeling version. It seems like there's a lot of energy around this point. Let's make sure we hear Sam's take 2 before we move on. Notice what got named. A lot of energy. A description of the room, not an accusation against a person. And it's almost impossible to push back on this because nobody got attacked. And it still does the job. Redirects the floor without anyone losing face. If you ever find yourself having difficulty getting buy-in for your ideas, you might want to try using the yes ladder. It draws on the principle of consistency. Once people commit to a position, even a small one, they feel internal pressure to stay consistent with it. A string of small, easy yeses primes someone to agree with the bigger conclusion that those yeses were building toward. Because disagreeing now would feel inconsistent with what they just said. Here's an example of a cold pitch without the yes ladder. I think we should restructure the onboarding process. There was no runway in that pitch, and the room actually hasn't agreed to anything yet, but what they're actually doing now is bracing defensively before they've even heard your reasoning. So instead, try the yes ladder version. Would you agree that onboarding's taking longer than it should?
Absolutely.
And that's mostly because of the manual handoffs between teams, right?
Right, that's the bottleneck.
So what if we restructured that part of the process? Small, easy yeses, each one feeding into the next. And so by the time you land on the actual proposal, it doesn't feel like a new idea being pitched. It feels like a conclusion that the room has already agreed to, one step at a time. The yes ladder builds buy-in. And this next strategy controls the reference point that the room uses to judge your ideas and numbers. Anchoring. Anchoring is one of the most replicated findings in behavioral economics. The first number introduced into a negotiation becomes the reference point everything else is measured against, even when people consciously know that the first number was arbitrary. Here's what happens when you give that power away. What's everyone thinking for budget on this? You've just handed the anchor to whoever answers first, and every number from there on in is measured against theirs, not yours. Here's an example of setting it yourself. I think realistically, this needs 40K to do it right. So we can talk about what that breaks down into. You've planted the reference point. Even if the final number lands at 30K, you've negotiated down from your anchor. And that produces a very different outcome than negotiating up from someone else's low opening offer. We've gone through different psychological strategies for influence in a meeting, but remember that influence is not about manipulating people into believing something that simply isn't true. It's about presenting true, good ideas in a way that actually matches how memory, trust, and group dynamics work in real time. And this helps others see that your good ideas are actually great. Follow for more on communication and engagement.